Well, in the early days, the only bands I knew, well, I mean, obviously everybody knew Shooting Star. Like those guys were just, they weren't even a local band to me. They were just kind of rock stars. They were already there. But whenever that first Fortress album came out, and I mean, I knew Frank, and that was kind of like right when they were recording that. I was probably, I feel like I must have been in middle, maybe 7th or 8th grade, maybe 7th grade. And then I heard it and I was like, whoa, these guys are gonna be famous, you know? So then I started kind of hanging out with those guys a little bit, just watching and looking and learning. They just were so tight. They were, I mean, they played covers, but they hadn't, like everybody played covers and had an original. So they would play One Block West and they would do mostly covers, but they would play Metal Meltdown, Headed for Nowhere and stuff. So those guys were really my first experience in seeing it like up close and how this all works and how do you make all this happen. I was just kind of watching, figuring it out. And then of course, when Banshee came around, those guys too were just like larger than life to me. But I always loved Foxy, like, cause that was when I was in high school too. But those guys were so cool. They were just cool. Like their music kicked ass, and they were, you know, they looked cool. They sounded cool. Like I was kind of infatuated with those guys for that period, because I was just like, man, like everybody wanted to be like Foxy. They looked cool, they sounded cool, their songs were actually good, like they were hooky, the guitar riffs were good. So yeah, for me, for a minute there, it was just all Foxy. But it was like Fortress until Fortress ended, and then it was like Fortress, Nasty, and Forced Entry sort of came together, and then that was my focus. And then the only local band I knew was Foxy as far as original wise. Like that was just a little bit before I was getting into the clubs. Like I had an idea. I was kind of into Vyper, you know, but then Vyper did that thing where it was like, we're Vyper, and then we're like, no, this is my Vyper, and then this is my Vyper. Like I remember a night in my junior year in high school when the competing Vipers did a show on the same night. I swear to God, one was at the Uptown and one was at that place in the City Market. What was that place called? Oh, it was just like a room. It was in the City Market. Why? I can't think of what it is. I'm sure somebody will remember what it is. So 2 Vipers, same night. I bought my Ticketmaster tickets. I show up with my date to the Uptown to see Vyper, and they're like, this is the wrong show. Like this is at, was it Palladium? Was there a place?
Yeah.
Palladium? Was it the Palladium? In the City Market, yeah. She's like, you're at the wrong show. Like there's 2 Vyper shows. I was going to see the Christy Black show. It was Christy Black's Vyper, and it was really weird. So anyway, they let me in. I digress. 2 Vipers. So yeah, Foxy and Fortress was it for me. And then Banshee was kind of a thing. We opened for Banshee up in Omaha. There's a video of that somewhere. Frank's got it somewhere.
Kansas City bands of that era of the 80s and 90s here, there was a lot of talent. There was a lot of individual talent. There was a lot of group talent. There was a lot of artistry, visual, you know, that was at play. So the bands that I got into early in those mid 80s and on, of course you had Banshee. Banshee was, I think, everybody in Kansas City's, you know, go-to for the shit, right? Because they were, let's face it, they're all amazing musicians and vocalists. Their stage show was above anything else that at least I saw. You know, hell, when you've got a drum riser rising up 10 feet in the air, you know, hydraulically and all this stuff for a local band, you're like, yeah, man. And Kent Burnham was a rock god to me. As you know, I'm more of a performer. I've never considered myself a percussionist, and that guy was and is to this day. He's amazing. But so yeah, Banshee was always great. Put on the great show. You know, the talent was just oozing at the seams with all of them. You know, you had Foxy, which everybody dug. They had the fucking cool look down, and the sound was awesome as well. The early days though, back before Banshee, you know, Harlow and Leather Toys, and Vyper, they're the ones that were really on that cutting edge of going to the glam thing, which was kind of big during those years. That led into the things that White Lize, not so much White Lize, but Downtown Clown definitely more of a glam type was. So those resonated with me. But Banshee just, man, it's hard to beat them. Outside of those, countless of other bands coming up through the years outside of those early influences that were amazing. And all you have to do is go and look at the KC Local Bands Facebook group and look at those albums of all the bands up there, because all of them were all part of that scene that were just kick-ass and doing their own individual uniqueness, right? And I loved all of them. That's the nice thing about that, all of us guys, the musicians on the side just dug hanging out. We all, have some beers, have some laughs, and it was so great. So it was really nice, especially with the practice halls. That all the bands would share, and you have some buildings that would have anywhere from 2 to 10 bands, in different rooms and what have you. And what a cool place to go hang out, with other peers of rockers rocking their ass off like you are. And so yeah, the beers were plenty and the laughs were nonstop. Fun times.
So my favorite local KC band when I was younger probably had to be Major Rager, because I took lessons from Brett Eklund, who's a guitar player and wrote a lot of the stuff. And they just had that like fun Van Halen vibe. I remember seeing a band called Avalanche open for The White, which was a Led Zeppelin tribute band. But I remember going to Seventh Heaven and getting their album and being like, holy shit, local bands put out records, And eventually I'd see like Vyper albums there and things like that. And to me, it was cool because it's like, oh, you can, it's like a rung on a ladder, another, like thing just to kind of like move up on, to where it's like, oh, you can do something locally. You don't have to be the biggest band in the world. You can just be a pretty cool band in Kansas City. And then I remember when Banshee came out, like going to, it was Peaches at the time, I believe. But I remember going in there and Eddie Pig playing the Banshee Crying the Night EP and being like, holy shit, what is this? It's like this, then finding out like, oh yeah, this is a local band, and, X many of years later, I was playing in an Iron Maiden tribute band with a drummer. And Kent Burnham,
KC Killers.
KC Killers, this is true. But yeah, so it was cool because I got to meet Kent and a couple other ways before that, and then played with them in KC Killers, doing all Iron Maiden stuff. And it was so cool because Iron Maiden was pretty much my favorite band just before I really got into Banshee. So it was like that whole just being a kid again, and that was pretty cool about the whole Banshee thing with that. And then, just again, like seeing like, oh, somebody from here can do something, it's like they did that EP. They had a lot of like really cool local shows. Next thing you know, they're signed. Next thing you know, they're on MTV. And, me and some friends were at a party and we knew that they were going to be playing the, was it the Shoot Down the Night video, wasn't it? That was, on Headbangers Ball, and it was like, yeah, they're on their way. And then it was like, oh shit, what happened? But, that's just kind of the way things went for a lot of bands at that time. But yeah, there's quite a lot of talent.
Well, when Banshee came on the scene, I guess the big, kind of bigger band than us at the time was Vyper. You know, I remember seeing Vyper, and you know, they were good. And Michael Scott Mills, actually his name. He was a really good drummer. But I don't know. I was always listening to more national acts, and again, I was I was a teenager, so if there was local bands back then, they were playing bars. I couldn't really see them, you know, unless it was just kind of more of younger kids, teenagers in our scene. And I don't know if you remember those days, but and again, I'm a few years older than you, but I just remember when I first joined Banshee, like somewhere in Kansas City, there was always a huge party on the weekend somewhere where there was a bunch of teenagers hanging out, and there was either a live band or they were listening to music, and there was just a huge party scene. And
that would have been Harlow.
Yeah, Harlow, but every just, you know, there'd be like field parties where like hundreds of kids, a bonfire, a bunch of cars cranking up their stereos, or they might even actually get a stage and have a band. There just seemed to be a scene that was happening, and it was very active and very vibrant. And there was a ton of people, and it was easy to connect to that scene. And you go and be like, yeah, we're in the band. You know, it was just really easy to network. I mean, that was our social media back then, just going to weekend parties and you know, hanging out with people. And so there was a lot of bands. And then, you know, once we got into the 90s, still a band that I love to this day is Shiner. I don't know if you know Shiner. Amazing band, amazing drummer. And I still listen to those guys to this day.
Vyper, I loved Vyper. Vyper blew me away. Christy Black and the boys, really, yeah, they hit me hard. Vyper, and yeah, I'd say Vyper was my main influence. Foxy, great freaking band. Banshee, great freaking band.
Back the bands that I really liked in KC, top one was Quietly Violet when I first heard them with, you know, Chris, and I ended up becoming a roadie for them, and it was just the whole LA Guns vibe. Everything was, you know, badass. The way they looked, the way they, you know, dressed, the sound was amazing. Dude, Den of Thieves. I used to love them guys. Just, you'd go down to Lone Star and see them, and they were just like, holy shit, these guys are badass. And then there was Menace. Menace just, they blew me away. I mean, when they come out, they were on the top of everything. I could never understand why they never got signed, you know. Mortal Rain. God damn. Going down to the parties was, you know, at their place, was Kick-Ass and Banshee. Everybody loves Banshee. Now, as far as that, there's Downtown Clowns. It was always a party. There was always some shenanigans going on. It was great, you know what I'm saying? So, and lots of women.
We loved playing with Downtown Clown and you know, we did at least 2 shows, I think, with you guys. But I don't know, man. I always looked up to Banshee, Foxy. Crazy story about, I actually met the guys. I'm just now remembering this because I was trying to think of what to say. I'm just now remembering, when I was in a Christian band called Martyr, we opened up, and I can't even remember the bands that played at Inglewood Theater, and I believe it's in Independence. And after the show, we went to it was Denny's or whatever to eat after the show. It was kind of late at night, and these dudes with this long hair sitting in a booth, one booth away from us. We're like, oh man, these guys are famous. These are famous rock stars. So they heard us talking, and so we got to meet them, and it ended up being the guys from Banshee, and supposedly they had just gotten back from California and played with Judas Priest and stuff like that. So that was my first interaction with those guys. So I always looked up to Banshee. But I would say Other bands that I liked was Razzmatazz. I thought that was a cool band. But yeah, those are probably my top 4 that I can recall offhand.
Michael Aaron came from a Vyper influence. Bill Mitchell came from a Vyper influence. Paul Mitchell came from a Vyper influence. So
Yeah, that Vyper thing, they really changed the scene. Absolutely.
they were our heroes as young hair metal musicians. They were the pinnacle. I mean, we had Missouri, Shooting Star, but they were really in our genre. And Vyper was, and they were all fucking fantastic musicians.
Man, I liked a lot of the bands. I always thought Foxy was awesome. And Zach Isaac. They always had such a cool look. Those guys were always cool looking, and all the girls wanted to hang out with them. And they were actually good musicians. I love Los's bass playing. So those guys were cool. But I actually really got into it watching the Leather Toys and Banshee. They practiced at a warehouse in North Kansas City, and my friend Tony's uncle, his cousin, Jeff Ford was the bass player, Jeff Ford. And so we go watch the Leather Toys practice, and then the Banshee guys would come rolling in, and Tommy Lee Flood's freaking this larger than life dude that freaking screams like a banshee, and so watching those guys, and man, that's how it all kind of started rolling, and I got into it. But I'm trying to think of some of the other bands that I liked a lot of bands. I used to go see everybody. Bishop Steel. We used to go see you guys, Downtown Clown. Used to go see Amethyst. I'm trying to think, Mooncap with Marshall. So many bands. I mean, the scene was so cool, and I'm blanking on bands, but there's a lot of really good bands. But I'd say my big bands that influenced me to go further in town would probably be Banshee, the Leather Toys, and Foxy.
What bands from Kansas City area did I like and why? Well, I would say one of the first bands that I really was impressed with was Banshee. When I first started Banzai Magazine, the very first show that I reviewed and wrote about was Banshee playing at the Uptown Theater. It would have been September 19th of 1986. Kent Burnham, I don't know if you're going to have him in this, it was his birthday. His birthday is September 19th. And I had met him before, but I didn't know really any of the other guys in Banshee. And Bob Bledsoe got me into the show, and yeah, they came out, and I was really blown away. I'd seen Vyper previously at the Uptown, and I thought they were okay. But Banshee came out, and I was blown away by them and their sound and their little stage show and everything. Very impressive. Another band that was opened up for them at that show was called Mortal Rain. Now, those were some guys that went through a series of changes before they became really popular about 1989 or 90. And, I liked their music and worked with them quite a bit. Some other bands might have been, Rampage was a very popular rock band back then. Ragdoll. I thought those guys were good. There was a few groups around that I thought were pretty solid.
I had met a girl, and she was from Kansas City. So I came down to visit her here in Kansas City. And she said, we're going to go to this thing called Metal Fest. It's a Metal Fest. That sounds interesting. So, she brings me down to Kemper Arena. I think it was American Royal. And it's one of Jim's Governor's Expo Hall. And it was one of Jim's shindigs. And I see Foxy. It blew me away. Banshee. And everyone's playing original music. And I was like, the place is packed. And I'm going, what is happening in Kansas City? Something's different here. When I saw these bands live, there was just this magic in the air. Not only just the magic of live really played music, but just all the people, the culture of it all. That really embraced me hard. But Banshee definitely had that kind of magic about them that they just got a chance to take a little farther than some of us got to.
Shooting Star was a big band I liked, and The Secrets. They both played in St. Joe at the Missouri Theater. And that was my third concert I went to, without parents. Was me and some friends went to that, and they just blew me away, because it was total Shooting Star was kind of like a mesh of a bunch of those bands. They had, you know, the rock guitar, great melody, vocals, lyrics, and then throw in the more, you know, the violin and the drums, and we're a little more proggy, you know, and I think they were the first KC band that I saw and loved, and I like the Rainmakers. I think they were a good band. Then fast forward, bands like Shiner, Molly McGuire, all those like 90s bands with all the freaking amazing drummers. Listen to like a couple Shiner records and you'll just be like, wow. And they're still playing now. I think they're recording a new record right now.
Yeah, the local bands I liked were all from a generation before. Shooting Star. How do you not like Shooting Star? My guitar teacher was in Morning Star. And they had 2 albums out on CBS in the 70s. So after I met Jerry, it was early 80s, late 70s maybe. I think it's 79 or 80. That's when I started taking lessons from him. But yeah, I would go back to those older bands. And you know, Banshee, I loved Banshee. I've always leaned towards one guitar bands anyway. And you know, they just did it right, you know. You gotta have a great singer. Obviously you gotta have somebody that can sing, and Flood had no problem doing that. Bill's still probably my favorite bass player I've ever heard around here.
Rest in peace.
You know, Terry and I play similar, you know, because we're both Randy Rhoads nuts. I mean, I discovered Randy Rhoads right after he died, basically, because I'm younger than those guys. But Terry has a ton of respect for Randy Rhoads and plays a lot like that. And I tend to lean that way too.
So I was playing in a cover band, and we were playing all over the Midwest. We played here in Kansas City at a place called Hot Rocks, and that was a great gig. It was really fun. And a guy came up to me after the show with a big long fur coat and long hair, and said, "Hey, my name's Christy Black. You know, I'm looking for a guitar player." And he informed me that I was it, that I was his guitar player. That was at the time when there was, you know, Foxy and Leather Toys, and all these bands would be out at the, you know, come out to see us play. Even my cover band, we'd come here. It was pretty cool because as a cover band, we were out, you know, playing bar gigs, and we'd come here, and it's like these guys come out and say, "Yeah, we just opened up for Ted Nugent last week, and we're getting ready to do this." And that was exciting for me. I was like, that's what I wanted to do. And then when I moved here and sort of got into the scene, got to know, you know, all those guys, and I got to be friends with guys, you know, guys like Brett Eklund and stuff with his assorted bands. You know, as a guitar teacher, we got hooked up together, and you know, eventually, of course, Banshee and you know, the Mortal Rain guys. I don't drink, so I wasn't really a partier, so I didn't really hit the partying scene. But I would still go down like to the warehouse and watch those guys practice or put on a show because I just love their music, you know. So got hooked up with those guys and got to know all the, you know, the Banshee guys, and eventually, of course, played with Kent for many years. So yeah, it was a good time back then.
Oh, the big bands I loved in the 80s, you know, in the scene was Foxy, Banshee, Major Rager, the big one. And then there's so many bands that we all played with, that we were all friends with. There's so many of them, so many people at that time. It'd be, I'd take up the whole interview just going through them all. But yeah, there were so many great bands. That's why the scene was so big. I think in Foxy, it was kind of on that theatric side, you know. It was a different type of theatric, you know. That's where you started getting into the hair metal, the glam, all that kind of stuff. So they were like super wild. I mean, I think Chucky said it best. They dressed like we all wanted to dress, or you know, or look, whatever. So that was the big thing with them. Banshee was a whole different animal. I mean, just the metal part of it, you know. Terry's playing, Tommy singing is incredible, of course. Ken on drums, and yeah, they were just. They were ready for the big time. You could tell when they played any of the halls that they played.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously, you know, the big one was Banshee, and I think it was, you know, I was playing, and I was when I was in that band, Doug, he had been taking some lessons from Terry. And so he was like, man, you need to go check this band out. And so we went to the Uptown Theater to watch their show. And I was just blown away. And of course, then I got their cassette. I'm listening to it nonstop, wore it out, had to get another one. And was just like all about that. Avalanche, Fortress, or some bands that kind of really stood out. Like in that time when, I was like, man, I want to play the Uptown Theater. That'd be awesome to get to that, level. And like at least in that moment, it's like those were a lot of the bands that were standing out to me. Yeah, it was just an energy. There was an energy that was there. You could feel it in the room. Like when you would go to the Uptown Theater to see these bands play, it didn't matter who it was. They'd get up there and it was just like, you'd hear that loud guitar, the kick, the heavy bass, and just those screaming vocals, man. It was just like heaven. It was like heaven. And for at least an hour or two, it's like, I just felt like, I was just in a different place that was better than where I was at.
There was a punk band called Gear that I thought were cool. There was a band at the time called The Edge, which became King's X. There was a healthy, there was a band called The Secrets from Fool's Face was from Springfield. They were great. And then The Secrets were a local kind of new wavy band. And then going into the mid 80s, early mid 80s, and then Vyper came out. And that changed everything for us. Because it was like, they played at the Uptown and they had a huge fucking banner and, they looked like fucking rock stars. And it was like, whoa, we can do this now? Because, before I'm having to play 4 sets of covers a night. Now all of a sudden, oh shit, I could start writing my own stuff. And then there were bars like Hot Rocks we talked about. And things started changing. But yeah, Vyper I think was probably what shifted everything. Because now all of a sudden we were like, oh, that's what we want to do. These guys look like they're making it big. So let's do that, And I remember there was another band at that time called Avalanche that were great. Going forward into the 80s, there were so many good bands in this town that were all different styles. Mooncalf, Mortal Rain, Downtown Clown, Den of Thieves, Cherry Winch, all those bands. Everyone had Stinky Pink. Everyone had their own kind of thing. No one really sounded like each other at all. We did shows with Forshe. We did, and that was the thing. It's like, and we touched on this before we started filming. It's like, it was nothing to have to go see a show where it was like Downtown Clown and Mortal Rain. This very candy-colored glammy band and fucking Metallica Jr., And it was like, we didn't see anything wrong with that. And that's what I think always made this scene so fucking cool. Because we didn't care. We were just all friends. We partied together and hung out and, knew each other from, working in record stores or wherever. And it was I don't know, it was a very unique situation that I think not a lot of other scenes had.